Welcome to Retech, and today we're going to have a look at another Sinclair machine, and today it's going to be the QL, but we're going to tackle it from a different angle because there's been a lot of videos on how the QL was a failure. There's been a lot of videos on how the internals of the QL and how the micro drives weren't particularly brilliant, and so on and so on, and the machine gets quite run down through most of the videos about this machine. So today we're going to look at it from a different angle. We're going to look at it from the angle of what made this machine such a market failure and why. And was it the marketing? Was it the way it was portrayed? Was it the design of the machine? Or was it simply muddled? So what we're going to do is have a look at some of the presentations that were out there when this machine was launched, and we're going to look into seeing why this machine ended up the way it did. So this video's now had to be split up into two parts. Part one is about the QL and the way it was marketed, and then part two is about the machine itself. So we're going to have a look at part one first, which will give you the background as to why this machine ended up the way it did. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's sit back and have a listen to the marketing behind the Sinclair QL.
Thank you very much. Will you raise your hands or yell if you can't hear me? You're having difficulty hearing me? How did you know to raise your hands?
Okay, so as starts go, this isn't a bad start with a bit of a joke, and it kind of settles the audience down, which is where you want to be, really.
Is that better? Yeah? Thanks very much, Jonathan. It's a real pleasure to be here in Boston and to be invited by the BCS to present the QL for the first time in public in America. I was going to begin by telling you what the QL was, but Jonathan's done that for me. It's a computer with the power of a business machine, but at the price of a home computer, one that is affordable by the consumer.
I mean, what does that even mean? Where is this machine being placed? It's quite ambiguous.
I'd like to start with a few slides. I
mean, really, for a new machine, this presentation seems very ill thought out, very rushed, and it's not very good. It's a bit of a mess.
Life-size QL.
Okay, so give us a chance to see the machine.
The original concept of the QL was developed in late 1982, and it was originally intended to be something quite different from what we wound up with. We had launched earlier in 1982, outside the USA, a computer called the Spectrum, which we've since sold 1.5 million of. We'd also announced in '82, although we didn't deliver until early in '83, our own proprietary mass storage system called the micro drive, which is an endless loop tape system. Uses small cartridges like this, each of which contains 100K bytes of program and data. It's a random access device so that it you can access files on it and so on in the same way that a disk is used. Very low cost, very compact, very light. And we'd also been working for quite a long time on a pocket television set, which we finally launched late last year. And the original concept of the new computer, when we started to design it in late 1982, was to take the Spectrum, to take two of the micro drives, and to take a modification of the flat cathode ray tube that's in the television, and to bundle them into a single portable machine. But things got changed a little along the way, and we decided not to make it simply a Spectrum. We decided to use a more powerful processor and to give the machine more memory than the Z80 of the Spectrum would easily support. So that's the way the QL ended up, and one of the few things that it had in common with the original intention of the design was the two built-in micro drives.
Okay, so this actually describes a computer that should have been built, would have been very popular, would have made a lot of sense because it had a huge back catalogue of software, and it would have been a commercial success.
It uses a member of the 68000 microprocessor family, the 68008. That was a major decision for us to make. I think it guarantees that the QL will have a long life because the 68000 family, I'm sure, is here to stay, and at its upper end with the 68020 is an extremely powerful processor.
So what you're saying is this is a low-end Sinclair QL, whereas really you should have used the 6820.
This shows the back of the machine. It drives a television set or an RGB monitor. It has two RS-232s built in. It has joystick ports. It has a solid-state ROM cartridge slot. It has two RS-232s, did I cover those? And it has a local area network built in.
Oh God, it's very muddled. It's not cohesive, and you know, I need this to keep me awake because this is so dull.
That shows how the half megabyte memory expansion plugs into this side of the machine and extends slightly beyond the machine. It has an external power supply. The machine comes with micro drive cartridges in these wallets, a very comprehensive user manual, although, as I hope to show you, not a very necessary manual because the machine is so very easy to use. In the read-only memory, 48K, it has an operating system and a version of BASIC which we call Super Basic.
Okay, at last, the selling point, Super Basic. At a time when people were moving away from BASIC. But at least it's a selling point.
It's a highly structured language in which you write procedures normally. You can use go-tos and go-subs and so on, as in ordinary BASIC, but you don't have to. It's a much more powerful language. The user interface with the operating system at the command level.
Command level. I mean, people at this point were moving towards the next generation, the mouse, the GUI. I mean, what were they thinking of?
Is also an integral part of the Super Basic. And in one of the applications, as you'll see, the database program, again, the interface is part of the BASIC. We're going to take a look now at some of the features of the machine actually running in a demonstration program on the machine. So could we switch from the slides to the screen? And if I can explain what is happening here, there are actually 4 totally independent programs running simultaneously on the screen. The main part of the screen is a BASIC program. There are 2 programs running the Sinclair logo at the bottom of the screen, and there's a third machine code program. Those are machine code programs. There's a third one which is running a real-time clock.
Very poor. Come on, you can do better.
I think apart from those 3 tasks at the bottom, and in some of the further part of this demo, you'll see the Sinclair name continuing, but otherwise I think everything in this demo is written in BASIC rather than in machine code.
I mean, BASIC or not, it's very lame. It's very, very lame. It doesn't engage. It's not very good.
It's got full travel 65-key keyboard. Sinclair has been rather famous for flat keyboards, and one keyboard that was described as feeling exactly like dead human flesh. I didn't know whether that was true, but I tried and it was.
Okay, so now let's take the mick out of our best-selling computer and what would be one of the UK's best-selling all-time computers. So let's just deride a machine that's carried you for the last 2 years. Okay, in the next clip you'll actually hear what Clive Sinclair kind of thought about the QL, and also what he thought about a machine that he would have liked to have produced. And it kind of seems that, well, let's take a look first.
Now, the QL didn't really address the mass market that you were hoping for in its sort of first launch. Is it mainly the software that you think is going to make it do that this time round?
Well, I don't think it was just the lack of software last year that made the results less than we expected. It was the early teething troubles and the fact that we just couldn't make the machines in the early part of last year. But now we've sold all that, but even allowing for that, we sold over 50,000 machines last year, which is more than any other serious machine. Clearly it's much less than a machine that sells principally on games, but that's not the category the QL is in.
Now, moving on from the QL sort of slightly into the future, the most recent news from Sinclair Research is obviously of the portable. Can you let us know or give us some idea of what its main features will be?
Right, I can say something about it, though not all about it. It's the first portable machine from Sinclair will be out next year sometime. We haven't got an exact date. And the first machine will be Spectrum-based. The reason for it being Spectrum-based is there's so much software out there already for Spectrum, and such a large user base. I mean, there are millions of people, literally, that have Spectrums, who we believe will be potential customers for the portable. But the portable isn't just a Spectrum repackaged. It's a completely new machine, which is Spectrum compatible. And my feeling about portables is that eventually all machines will be portable. But what holds that back at the moment is that today's portables are a severe compromise in at least two ways. One is the display just isn't satisfactory.
Right.
Most portables use a liquid crystal display, and wonderful as that is a technical achievement, the appearance is very deficient.
So you obviously have other plans for your display?
We have our own technology there, yes.
That you can talk about, or?
Yeah, well, I can say what it does. But may I just mention that the other deficiency, and that is price. I don't believe that anybody is going to, in the long term, I don't think that people in general are going to pay a premium price for a portable. What they need is a portable that is not a compromise in any sense, so that can be the one machine they have, and has the additional advantage of portability at low cost.
Okay, so you can see that Clive Sinclair wasn't really 100% behind the QL in the way it was produced. I think Clive Sinclair would rather have had his laptop-derived computer. Now, he's talking about this on the relaunch of the QL. Now, according to Nigel Searle, they were talking about this before the QL was released, but they changed their mind and then made the QL. Now, it seems that they couldn't make their laptop, so the technology that was kind of there when they actually started to design their laptop and realized they couldn't make it or was going to be too expensive was literally carried over into the QL. So I think the way that Clive Sinclair really wanted to go was with the laptop, not the standalone desktop. And I think the QL was kind of a second place model to that. But now here's the but. The Sinclair QL, when it was launched, was one of the first 16/32-bit machines. It was hamstrung by the processor that they used because of its 8-bit data bus. It wasn't really a true 32-bit computer. Now, it was still streets ahead. It was still so far ahead of its competitors at the time, especially for that price point, that it should have done really, really well. But it didn't. And it didn't do well because Sinclair, or Sinclair Research as a company as a whole, really didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know where to place it. They didn't know how to market it. They didn't really know what the machine was all about. Some say that the microdrives were its Achilles heel. I kind of tend to agree. But if they were brought out a year earlier as in a mass market product like the Spectrum with a built-in microdrive, it would have done very, very well. But unfortunately, it arrived when floppy disks were being cost reduced and becoming affordable. And there were quite a few other shortcomings for the QL, and one of the major ones were its keyboard. Although it looks really nice, it's not a huge machine even by today's standards, and it's actually a lot smaller than a standard PC keyboard. And that's the entire machine. There's no tower unit, there's no desktop base unit, there's just what looks like a rather chunky keyboard, and that's the entire computer. But the keyboard was not good. It was awful to type on. It was not very tactile. It was clumsy. It had very little feedback, and the basis of that was used on the Spectrum Plus, which had an even worse version of this keyboard. It was even more cost reduced, even more rattly and clunky. And the QL in comparison felt nice, but it still wasn't up to the job of having a standard keyboard. Even if it was built on a membrane, it would have been a much better job, and it would have been a much better keyboard, had a much better feel. And even if it kind of only felt as good as the Atari STs, that was adequate. The Atari ST keyboard wasn't the best, but it was adequate, and it worked, and it wasn't too bad under your fingers, and it just felt like a slightly spongy standard keyboard, where the QL felt nothing like that. See, some of the design quirks were the things that killed the machine as well. But mainly, it was the way it was marketed. It was the way the machine was handled. It was the way it was put out there. It was the way it was rushed into production. And this is what we're going to cover in the next episode. Now, Nigel Searle comes across as a really nice person. And I'm not deriding him for this exhibition of the Sinclair QL, and I'm not saying that he couldn't market his project, he couldn't market his products, and he couldn't market the company. But in this occasion, it wasn't great, whether it was technical aspects or the fact that he'd come off of a long flight and he was very, very jet lagged. But really, that's not a huge excuse when you're trying to launch a product that cost millions to develop into a huge arena like the United States. So thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll have a look at this in part 2 as we go forward with the Sinclair QL. So please subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye bye.